Who were some of the most undervalued and overvalued rookies heading into the NFL draft? All that more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by HelloFresh. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/NFL60 and use code NFL60 for 60% off plus free shipping. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Kate Magdziuk. Check her out on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Kate, we are less than a week away from the NFL draft. So, of course, we're talking rookies, and can't wait to get into it with you.
Very excited. So 1 week from today's show, right now, 1 week from this moment, we're going to be talking about Bijan Robinson as the newest addition for the Dallas Cowboys. And I can't wait to get your thoughts on it. But I'll try not to get too far ahead of myself.
As long as it's not a trade up, I can stomach it.
But you know what? I have a feeling that you're going to be having your fingers crossed for another guy that we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about overrated and underrated players. So all week long, we've been talking about our consensus Locked On Dynasty rookie rankings. And now we're going to put it all together. We're going to take a look at our consensus rookie rankings and match them up round for round against the average draft position of these rookies in real life rookie drafts. And we want to see, who do we think is overrated based on our ranking and their general ADP, and maybe where we see some diamonds in the rough here. And this is going to be an interesting show. We're gonna poke the bear a little bit with this one, I think.
All right, let's start with a big name player before we start to get down there. Michael Mayer. So, Kate, you and I both have Michael Mayer as the #1 tight end in this class from a dynasty perspective. Matt actually has him ranked 5th overall. Ryan's got him 3rd among tight ends. And that's interesting to me because in Dynasty League football, he's being ranked and drafted as tight end 1. So I don't know if he's undervalued in your Dynasty leagues or anything like that. However, what I would say is I won't be shocked if other league mates just don't view him as highly as we do.
Well, and let's look at, some of the names that maybe surpassed him. So the two that come to mind when looking at Matt and Ryan's rankings, Dalton Kincaid and Darnell Washington, which Dalton Kincaid, I think
I get
it with Dalton Kincaid. Darnell Washington is the harder one to swallow. And Ryan has him as tight end 1 in this class. And I have a sneaking suspicion that it is due to one's, shall we say, delicious combine performance. Do we think that's fair enough that's where that's originating from?
I think so, because people see the height and they see the speed and they see, hey, maybe he could be the next Jimmy Graham or maybe he could be the next Rob Gronkowski. But the fact is, it's just we don't have a lot of history of him catching a bunch of passes, and he's not really somebody who breaks a lot of tackles. I believe he had 10 forced missed tackles during his entire career at Georgia. I get the upside, but Mayer and Dalton Kincaid are just way more likely to translate to fantasy producers, at least right away.
I think, looking at Michael Mayer's production, first of all, coming out of Notre Dame, you hate to helmet scout, but Notre Dame has been a pretty solid spot for developing tight ends, and we've seen that translate to the NFL relatively well. Michael Mayer, back-to-back seasons with over 800 receiving yards, has plenty of snaps out of the slot. I think he's one of the safest prospects. He's a great asset when it comes to the deep ball, ranked first among tight ends in terms of deep catches, deep yards, ranked first overall among tight ends in contested catches. Like the ability and the physicality that he brings, and the way he pairs that with his ability as a receiver, I think just makes him the safest tight
I
end
agree.
overall in this entire class.
Yeah, I just can't see him being a bad NFL player, and that means he's going to be on the field a lot. And while it might not translate to high end tight end one production, it just feels very unlikely that you're getting somebody who's not somewhere between the 8th to 13th best tight end in the league. So I think he is a little bit undervalued because of the safety there. I also want to mention somebody that we're a little bit higher on as well at the tight end position, Sam LaPorta. On Dynasty League Football, he's being drafted and ranked as tight end 6. Okay, collectively, we have him as tight end 5, but you actually have him at tight end 4. Explain the reasoning behind that one.
Again, coming from this perspective of I don't want to helmet scout, but Iowa has not been a too shabby school for the tight end position. But again, you love to see his involvement as a receiver, back-to-back seasons with over 600 receiving yards. He's got speed. He's got, I think, some spark. And I think like his ability after the catch, ranked second among tight ends in terms of missed tackles force. Like, I think all in all, he's again a guy that maybe doesn't have the, necessarily like safest hands, but like he's got all the tools, I think, in terms of like the package that it's going to take to make that next jump at the next level. And I mean, he had a fantastic combine. Like when you talk about tools, like he's got big hands. He ran a 4.59, at 245 pounds. Like I think, the broad jump, 10 foot 3 inches, like all of that showcased, I think, a lot of the explosivity that we see after the catch for Sam LaPorta. Landing spot, if he gets, drafted into an offense where there's going to be some opportunity as a receiver, I really like his chances at being one of these underrated tight ends in this class.
I'm going to re-rank my rookies here in the next week, and LaPorta is somebody who's going to be higher. I'm going to take him ahead of Luke Musgrave just because of the stuff after the catch, as you mentioned. Sam LaPorta in 2022 alone had 20 missed tackles forced. Luke Musgrave had 2 in his entire career at Oregon State. Like they couldn't be more different after the catch. And I know that Musgrave is bigger and has maybe a little bit more long speed, but I just think LaPorta is the better pure receiving option. And if he can get that top 75 draft capital, which he will, there's no reason to think that he couldn't produce by year 2 in the NFL. Okay, let's talk about somebody who is overvalued, at least in our minds, next. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Something exciting is coming to Built.com on April 22nd. That is tomorrow. I don't have all the details yet, but I can tell you the excitement is real and something is coming that you don't want to miss. If you know how Built works, they have some of the most incredible protein bars on the planet, and they do these amazing flavor drops with unreal flavors and limited quantities. So mark your calendars. Head to Built.com on Saturday, April 22nd to be one of the first to discover what the hype is all about. I can't wait to see what the new flavor is. We were speculating in a group chat what it could potentially be. I'm hoping for some kind of coffee flavored Built Bar. We'll see. But make sure to use promo code LOCKEDON15 and you'll get 15% off your next order at Built.com. Locked On NFL's mock draft special is here, and it's bigger than ever. Follow along all 32 teams with their first pick in a 6-episode ultimate mock draft experience only that Locked On can deliver. All episodes are available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Okay, let's talk about an overvalued player according to our rankings, and that's Devin Achane, a running back from Texas A&M. We have him ranked, as I'm looking at here, the 7th running back in this class. But if you head over to Dynasty League Football, you'll see that he's being ranked and drafted as RB4 in this class. Why are you down on him compared to the consensus?
Interestingly, I actually had him ranked highest out of all of us at RB5. And
Yep.
again, this is one of those things where I feel like in my final rankings, I'm probably going to bump him down a little bit because there are some guys behind him like a Kendre Miller and a Roschon Johnson and a Zach Evans who just they feel like every time I'm watching them, it feels like I just am not high enough on these guys. So um Devin H, I think the question about him is like, is he anything besides speed? Like we know he's speed, right? Like we know he's
He's fast. He's really fast.
he's like, but that's what he is, right? And
Mhm.
so outside of that speed, what is he? I'm not really sure, and I think that that's probably the biggest question among, all of these running backs that are, like, in this upper echelon tier, like, I Jahmyr Gibbs has over 10 pounds on him, 11
Mhm.
pounds, same height, like, we know that he's got that pretty small frame,
Yeah.
5'8", 3/4 inches, 13th percentile for running backs, 188 pounds. That's the 3rd percentile. Arm length, 4th percentile. Hand
He's just
size,
not big. Yeah.
8.5-inch hands. Like, generally speaking, not great. But again, the speed is there. And I feel like when I ranked him at RB5, I was looking at that speed. And you know what? Like, I'm trying to figure out like what else is there and how will it translate to the NFL, and that overarching question I feel like is going to keep knocking him down my
Yeah.
draft board. Not because he's like, you're not going to knock him because he's fast. It's just, what else is he? And do you have a good answer for that?
No, I think if you're drafting A Chain, it's because of his speed, and you're going to try to find ways to put him in the best position to use that. And that means probably no short yardage work, probably mostly working on passing downs. Now, that guy can have value, right? Like we've seen this type of player before work in the NFL. It's just, I think it's going to be very hard for him to ever be a consistent producer because I feel like his role is going to shift, right? Depending on the games. Like, I don't know if you can count on him to be a 14 to 15 touch player. It might be more like 8 to 10 touches, which could be super valuable, but I just don't know if you're ever going to see the workload there to justify his price. Now, I want to talk about another running back that we are higher on than the consensus. That is Roschon Johnson on
Oh,
Dynasty League Football. He's being drafted and ranked as RB10. We have him at RB6. Okay, you have him ranked at 6. I have him ranked at 7. Matt has him at 6, and Ryan has him at 8. Why are you so much higher on him than the consensus?
I feel like he really just embodies this sort of mold that we saw with a guy like Damian Pierce, who like had all of the right tools when you're looking at like the stats and the efficiency and
Mhm.
what he's produced when given touches. You're really happy with everything that you see. Like, passes the eyeball test by far. He's a creative runner. He's tough. Like, he can force missed tackles. Like, he's like a really tough running back, and he's this type of running back that I just love watching because he exudes power. And again, I think that's going to translate so well to the NFL. And when you look at like, well, why didn't he beat out, the starting running back for the job? It was Bijan Robinson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there is no better excuse for Roschon Johnson to have not taken over that starting role. Like I think there's plenty of room for development. But again, Marcus, you look at his size, right? Where is he at? 6 foot, 219 pounds. Like,
Mhm.
has that build for a guy that, can handle 15 plus touches a game. He's got big hands. He's like,
Yep.
I think, not necessarily a speed guy, but like what he lacks in speed, he makes up for in power. And if he gets it like into a role where, you know, the competition for touches is wide open, I have no doubt that he's going to be able to win it. It's just that he's going to fall down the draft boards
Yes.
because of who was ahead of him. And I'm not going to hold that against him.
No, and you shouldn't, because we've seen over the last 5-6 years that sometimes even college coaches don't know who the better running back is. I mean, I could give you a ton of examples. Tony Pollard played behind Darrell Henderson at Memphis. They made him play slot receiver there. Josh Jacobs, literally the leading rusher in the NFL, an all-pro running back, played behind Damian Harris at Alabama and never started. Sony Michel started ahead of Nick Chubb. I mean, we could go on and on and on. Like, a lot of times these guys are these backfields that both have NFL talent. The backup ends up having the better NFL career. Well, I don't think that's super likely here. If Roschon Johnson was on, pick a Big 12 school, Oklahoma, rather than Texas, we might be talking about him as a third running back in this class. So you're getting a little bit of a discount because he was behind Bijan Robinson, and you're getting a discount because he doesn't have a million touches already on his body. Like, he is going to be a very fresh player coming into the NFL. I also think, go ahead.
And let's also acknowledge the fact that, like, he came into Texas as a quarterback. Like,
Yeah.
this has been him. Like, we've seen him be this productive. A stat courtesy of PFF. His 45% forced missed tackle rate over the last 2 years leads all running backs in the country with at least 198 attempts. That is pretty dang good. And again, like, he has made the transition from a quarterback. They had needs at running back. He made that positional transition, and he's made this sort of progress. He's had this sort of efficiency while still learning the position and having very limited reps
Yes.
in live game time. Like, there is nothing to dislike about Roschon Johnson, even like his receiving work year over year. He hasn't had a big role there, but again, his role on the field was limited in general. But year over year saw it, increase in receptions, receiving yards. He's a guy that I think in the right situation could come in, put up 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, and I
Yes.
wouldn't blink
Well,
twice.
and that's the thing, is I think his role in the NFL is going to be very conducive to producing fantasy points, because you mentioned, like, he could be the short yardage running back. Pick a team. Let's say, best case scenario, he ends up in Dallas or Philadelphia, and that's the teams that are just using him as that hammerhead inside the 5-yard line. Like, it wouldn't shock me if he scored 14 touchdowns, like, as a rookie. Like, honestly, it wouldn't. So I think this is somebody who we've seen kind of the arrow start going up and up and up. And now you're starting to see people in the draft community, such as Dane Brugler, ranking him inside their top 100 players. If he gets third round draft capital, it's Roschon Johnson to the moon. Okay, let's move over to wide receivers and talk about a receiver that we have ranked higher than the consensus and lower than the consensus next. All right, Kate, we are back here talking about some of the most underrated and overrated players right now in Dynasty League football. We've got this little spreadsheet that we're looking at. You actually highlighted one of the names that we should talk about. One of the players that we are higher on than the consensus is Jonathan Mingo, a wide receiver from Ole Miss on Dynasty League football. He's being drafted and ranked as wide receiver 12. I believe we have him at wide receiver 8 or so, or around there. Why do you like Mingo more than most?
So I think the biggest thing for me, Marcus, and I'll tell you, I saw some red flags. Like, there feels to me like there is like some sort of disconnect between maybe like what I see on the tape, because the tape can be flashy. Like, dude can make wild catches for days. And you know what else about Jonathan Mingo? He's like the size of an actual wide receiver.
Yeah.
That cannot be understated enough. He's 6 foot, 223 pounds, I believe.
He's huge. Yep.
Has like monstrous hands, great speed, especially when you consider his size. But he's like a very explosive player, and you see that time and time again on the tape. But like, I have some reservations. I think, again, for his size, that's going to give him an edge over a lot of guys in the right situation. I think he can be just fine. But I'm
The tape
he's
is just so
inconsistent.
he's inconsistent, and Ole Miss put him in a lot of situations where he just can run as fast as you can without press coverage, and you're going to be wide open. Like a lot, if you watch his production, a lot of it is where he is wide open down the middle of the field. But you are talking about somebody who has fantastic size. And I know we hate the helmet scout, but Ole Miss has done a pretty good job of producing receivers in the NFL. And I remember when AJ Brown came out of Ole Miss, there was, hey, he's this big slot receiver. We really don't know what to do with. He tested amazing, but where do you play him? With in a class of receivers that's also tiny, it's probably not the worst idea to grab a huge receiver from the SEC with production.
That's like that's where I give him the edge here. Even despite like I do think there were again some inconsistencies when I watched him on tape. Like there
Yeah.
were times it either felt like he was going at 120 or it felt like he just kind of gave up. Like there was a lot of um I don't know, there were a lot of moments where I was like, is his heart like in this route? I don't know. And then you see him on the
He's
next
just
play
not
and
developed that at all. Like, and you watch him at the Senior Bowl, and it's a struggle for him to run routes. Now, the hope is that you get him in one of these like Kyle Shanahan schemes where he doesn't route running's not the most important part of being a receiver.
I think that's fair. And like the question too, that I have for him, it sounds like I'm a lot more negative than positive. But again, in comparison to ADP, I do think like,
Yep.
yeah, I'm gonna throw my 8th overall pick onto Jonathan Mingo, I'm gonna make Jonathan Mingo like my wide
Wide
receiver
receiver. Yep.
7, wide receiver 8 on the chance that like, oh, he's this big dude, he's got a lot of speed, especially for that size. Like I'm gonna take a
Yep.
dart throw on him as opposed to one of these 170-pound receivers who like we know chances are pretty good won't hit. Um,
Well, it's funny you say that because one of the
uh,
players that we are lower on than the consensus is Jalin Hyatt, and that's a 6 foot, 176-pound receiver. We have him ranked as wide receiver 10, wide receiver 11. He's being drafted as wide receiver 6 on Dynasty League football. Now, that might not seem like a big gap, right? It's wide receiver 6 to wide receiver 10, but that might be a half a round or a full round, depending on your rookie drafts. Why are you lower on him than the consensus?
Honestly, I think it's Cedric Tillman. Like,
Yeah, there you go.
it's really hard to have these 2 guys back to back and not give Tillman the edge,
I
and
agree.
it's kind
He's
of
just a
weird because
better overall football player, right?
I think he's the better football player, and yes, you look at Jalin Hyatt, he won a very prestigious award off of the back of an injury to Cedric Tillman. I do think Cedric Tillman would have continued a hopefully more productive season than he had started off with in 2022 prior to his injury. But again, you look at the build 6'3", 215. Like Cedric Tillman is probably the biggest reason for me knocking down Jalin Hyatt because I watch his brand of football and I like it a lot better than Jalin
Yeah.
Hyatt. His
Well,
size translates better to the NFL, and he's got just some of the best hands in this entire class. That translates for me.
yeah, and it's just for me, like with Hyatt, he's such an inconsistent route runner. He had such easy routes at Tennessee. He was always playing in the slot, never against press coverage. And then you're talking about a 175-pound slot receiver who he's fast. Don't get me wrong. He ran a 4.40 at the 4-yard dash. That's fast. But I think the expectation was he was going to be like a 4.2 guy. And my problem is if you're going to be a speed receiver, I want you to be like, you know, ridiculously fast. He's going to be the same speed as the corners that he's facing on Sunday in the NFL. I every time I watch him, I can't help but think, is he just Robbie Anderson in the NFL?
Oh
Like one
god.
of these. I mean, Anderson was bigger, ran a little bit faster, but like that type of receiver, because I don't see Tyreek Hill, I don't see Deshaun Jackson twitchiness, like in and out of breaks and all that stuff. He's certainly not Tyreek Hill. I I think he's a little overvalued.
He's a deep threat. He's got speed. Is he a one-trick pony?
Yes.
Like it feels like that might be what we're looking at. Fifth highest passer rating against man coverage, but in terms of what he produced against man coverage, saw a really big drop in yards after the catch, yards per reception against man. I do think when he's playing against NFL caliber opposing corners,
Yeah.
he's going to have a lot more to compete with. Didn't see a single contested target against man coverage. He's going to have a lot to prove at the next level.
Well, and the thing is, you hear him comp to Will Fuller a lot, and I agree. I think the play style is similar. The difference is Will Fuller at the NFL Combine ran a 4.32. And again, when you're talking about speed receivers, every 100th of a second matters. And Will Fuller was 12 pounds heavier, right? So you just have a bigger, faster version. And we know for Will Fuller, remove the injuries, even when Fuller was healthy, you were getting what? A wide receiver 2 at best. It just feels like he is way, way overvalued as wide receiver 6 right now in dynasty leagues.
Yeah, I just don't understand how we look at Jalin Hyatt, what he accomplished this year, and not give Cedric Tillman the edge. And honestly, Marcus, I swear if these two hadn't come out of the same offense and I wasn't comparing them, play for play, I might be a little bit higher on Hyatt here. But
well, and remember, Kate, in 2021, when Tillman was going crazy, Hyatt wasn't even the second best receiver on that team. It was Velus Jones, who got drafted by the Bears in the 3rd round. Tillman was putting up ridiculous numbers. Velus Jones was the second receiver, and Hyatt was kind of an afterthought in this offense. So that kind of tells you what the coaching staff thought about those 3 players, at least last season.
And you know what, Marcus, this issue that we've had sort of with evaluating players, specifically Hendon Hooker, specifically these wide receivers, is that this offense was kind of just built on you guys run and you're going to be open and I'm going to throw you the ball when you're it was a very basic sort of offense. And when I'm looking at Hyatt's skill set, right? It's speed. Okay, you run, I throw you the ball. It's so basic, right? It's so basic. And I do think Tillman has a more versatile skill set that has a chance to set him up for more success
100%.
At the NFL level when he's going to see some different challenges in coverage.
That is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Everydayers, Kate and I will be back on Monday to help get you ready for the NFL draft. We are less than a week away. It's so stinking exciting. I'm pumped up right now. Make sure you check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Go to YouTube. You can listen to us over there. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you guys next time.